Hello, Brian and Pardeep. We are here as consultants from Your Money, and I'm joined by Andrew, Nick, and Neela. And today we'll be talking about some issues that you brought up from our last meeting. So today we'll be going over just a summary of your current situation, Brian, your employment issues, and some analysis, and also Pardeep, your different job offers and considerations. And then also we'll be looking at the wedding budget, planning for a family, buying a house, and also looking at retirement considerations, while also any additional issues that might arise, and also we'll have some final recommendations. So Pardeep and Brian, right now, Brian, you're self-employed, which is providing some tax benefits as incorporated individual, while Pardeep, you are considering between two different job prospects, and we have made an analysis and forecasted a salary based on the two options. And for the wedding, as you both have mentioned, you have budgeted $30,000, and we have taken that into account while also looking at your potential prospects for a house down payment, having children with the certain maternity benefits, and also we have found the feasibility of whether retirement will be able to be made with your comfortable lifestyle currently.
So for Brian, you expected your income to be growing at 5% in the next 5 years and 3% thereafter. So we ran a sensitivity and we want to see a growth for 1% decrease and 1% increase in growth. So for home office expenses, you said you were not claiming these deductions, and we want to tell you that you are eligible to make these deductions as you are a sole proprietor and you run the business solely out of your home. And these eligible expenses include heat, electricity, water, maintenance, and rent, as well as property taxes and insurance and mortgage interest. That being said, your expenses in the year cannot exceed your net income, and if it does, you cannot report that loss in the year. However, you can carry forward that loss to future tax years. Now, for RRSPs and TFSAs, the main consideration here is to determine whether you or when you want to withdraw this money. So for TFSA, if you want to withdraw this money before retirement, I would suggest a TFSA. However, if you're planning on withdrawing this money in retirement, I suggest RRSP because you will likely be in a lower tax bracket. Now, for your vehicle, you have a $18,000 car loan over 5 years with 1.5% interest. In our analysis, we determined that you can afford to pay off this loan as of now. However, it will hurt your liquidity, and you'll only be saving $73.36 in interest, so it may not be super beneficial. As for CPP and EI, as a sole proprietor, you are responsible for both the employer and employee part of the CPP contributions, and you will be eligible for a deduction on the employer part of this contribution, as well as a additional 15% federal tax credit for the employee portion. As for EI, as a self-employed person, you are not required to make these payments. However, you can opt in and get these benefits. An alternative to this is to invest the EI premiums in a separate TFSA to earn a higher return, as you can take on riskier investments and use that money for different purposes.
So Hardeep, you have received a job offer as a controller with Rejuvenate Inc., which would result in a $10,000 salary increase from your current salary as an audit manager in Ontario. However, this job is in Manitoba. So the graph that we have here represents your projected income up until age 55 when you plan to retire. The orange line represents the auditor's salary, and the blue one is the controller's salary, which increases at a slightly higher rate if we take into consideration the 4% annual growth on salary. It's clear that taking the controller position would result in an overall higher compensation, and the gross amount that you would have to forfeit if you stayed in Ontario is $601.8 thousand. So you should also consider that Manitoba has higher provincial tax rates on personal income than Ontario, and we use the 2018 tax rates to compute net salary under both employment alternatives, and for 2019, although gross salary is a $10,000 difference, the net salary difference would only be $3.5 thousand. And in your final work year in 2046, assuming the tax rates remain constant, the variance between the two positions in a net salary would only be 7.9 thousand. It's also important to take into consideration the cost of living in Manitoba is significantly lower than that in Ontario. For example, in Ontario, rent is double and consumer goods are 33% higher than what it is in Manitoba. Additional considerations include Pardeep can deduct moving expenses from her salary income reported on her T1, and also the province in which they reside at the end of December 31 is the one in which you should be filing your tax returns. You also should be taking into consideration the different benefits from the pension plans that you could be enrolled into. So a defined benefit pension plan puts more risk on employers, and from this benefit you would receive $124,000 per year after retirement, while on the other hand, a defined contribution plan would require you to put in 6% of your annual income, which would be matched by Rejuvenate at a 75% rate, which would give you $18,000 of income for 25 years after retirement. So after taking this into consideration, it's clear that the defined benefit pension plan that is provided by your auditor job is much higher and would allow you to live at a much comfortable rate at retirement, so we suggest sticking to this job.
Alright, so we've taken a look at your wedding budget. So $30,000 is actually about average for wedding spending, although you do have some ambitious savings goals at the moment, and this high cost will definitely cut into your current savings. And so any costs that we can cut will help with achieving your savings goals faster, such as a down payment on a house and having money to raise a family. So just a few potential cost-cutting measures here is, the first one is to consider a modest venue. So the venue is usually the biggest expense in a wedding. So cutting down on the venue cost can actually be a great way to lower the total cost of the wedding. Another one is to keep the guest list shorter than you may initially have thought. So a lot of weddings these days have hundreds of people coming, and that cost really adds up fast. And so consider having just close friends and family, potentially friends of them, as a cost-cutting measure. And finally, avoiding an open bar is a big one. Drinks are very expensive, and when every single guest is having a handful of drinks, the cost really adds up. Now looking into saving for the potential of having children, some important considerations are mainly that kids are very expensive and they add a lot of new costs to your life. For this reason, it's important to build savings in case of any unexpected shortfalls or costs. In the case of an unexpected shortfall, for example, if one of you were to lose your job or if your income were to be diminished in any way, it's a lot more important once you have kids, since there is a new person to take care of. And for the same reason, it's important to ensure you have adequate cash flow to cover any new expenses that do come up as a result of having children. And a few of these new expenses might include things like daycare and babysitting. So you actually are both working, which means that there will probably be times where you do need to pay for some kind of childcare. Additionally, things like food, clothes, diapers, toys, and furniture like cribs are costs that are often sort of left to the side when having children, but they can be substantial. And another important note is that it's very easy to overspend on some of these expenses, such as toys, since they're for your child. And so for this reason, it's important to stay disciplined when spending on these types of things. So now looking into saving for a down payment. We've gone with an average Toronto home price of about $800,000. This is quite high, as home prices have been rising a lot in recent years. For downtown Toronto, this would be a little bit higher, about 5%, and for suburban Toronto, you'd be looking at about 5% lower. Generally, you want a down payment of about 20% or more of the home value. So in this case, that would be about $160,000 or more. And this is because with a down payment of less than 20%, you're looking at a high rate mortgage for which you need mortgage default insurance, which can be a significant additional expense. Currently, interest rates are actually rising, and so mortgages will continue to become more expensive. And so when you do look into getting a mortgage, you will want to consider a fixed rate mortgage, as you can lock in a lower interest rate and avoid the effects of a higher or rising rates. Additionally, home prices are expected to fall or otherwise stop rising in the near future. It is difficult to predict 3 years ahead, but with the current trend, we think it's reasonable to continue with an estimate of about an $800,000 average home price. So we just did a quick calculation, and we found that from scratch, and to attain that amount of a down payment, you would need to save about $2,000 a month for the next 3 years. This is a substantial amount, although any of your current savings could go towards that, which would make it a lot easier to save that amount. And now just looking at the types of benefits that party could potentially get when you do start to raise a family. EI maternity benefits can be claimed near the end of pregnancy or after birth, and they are up to 55% of the average weekly insurable earnings for up to 15 weeks. And EI parental benefits come afterwards, so after birth, and those are an additional 55% of average weekly insurable earnings for up to 35 weeks, or a lower amount for a longer period of time is also an option. Both of these are calculated on a maximum yearly salary of about $52,000, which is less than Pardeep's current salary, which means that there will be a limit on the amount that can be received. But it is also possible that Pardeep will receive employer benefits, which sometimes top up the benefit by providing the additional percentage of the salary that the EI does not provide. Although this does vary on a case-by-case basis, so it's important to talk to your employer and look at your contract and see what kind of benefits you are entitled to.
So in terms of retirement, as you've both stated, there is an annual spending of $75,000, and with an investment rate of return in conjunction with an inflation rate, we have a real discount rate of 2%. And estimated over 25 years after retirement, you will need around $1.4 million in your retirement savings plan. And what that means is you'll have to have an annual contribution of around $32,000 combined. So that proportion is based off a combined income of both you, Pardeep, and Brian. And as you can see on the graph in the top left-hand corner there, or top right-hand corner on your side, the balance starts at around $4,000, and with an annual contribution of $32,000, the balance will reach around $1.2 million at the end.
So for your forecasted net worth, you have a CAGR of 39.64% over the next 5 years. And this is really going to help you obtain and further that debt financing that will be helpful in your house mortgage and potential car loans. You also have a low debt to equity ratio, which is good, and it allows you to take on more debt. And given your liquidity position, you are able to take on riskier investments and hopefully achieve a better return.
We've also projected your annual cash flows for the next 5 years, and they're consistent cash flows with CAGR of 14%. And upon deeper analysis, it may appear possible to reduce car maintenance expenses in order to increase your cash flows. And additional ways to do this would be to decrease or just cut off donations, and also cut back on vacations, personal expenses, dining, and entertainment expenses.
And in terms of government pension payments, there is something called old age security after 65, with people that make under 74, around 75K income. There is a security that gets paid out to them. So anything above that 75K threshold gets repaid back as a old age security clawback. And since this clawback is based on a CPI index, by the time both of you retire at 55 and 60 respectively, then this threshold will be much higher than 75K, so we can assume that you'll be eligible for the whole old age security. And thank you for coming out and listening to our suggestions.